I wanted to bring up that I know maybe you guys took some issue with this when I brought it up earlier, but I feel like that Andy Kaufman and Jim Carrey and they're kind of like these trickster characters or jester characters where they're explicitly not in charge. They're not the king, right? They don't have any responsibility other than their job is to entertain people. And a lot of times what the way that they do this is by kind of making fun of the king, right? Is kind of like poking fun at the king or like saying something that just basically being honest and telling the truth. I feel like when you break the rules in service of the truth, that people look a lot more kindly on that than just breaking the rules for the sake of breaking the rules. And so I think like if there's some greater truth that's being revealed by Andy Kaufman's behavior or Jim Carrey's behavior, then people to the degree that they're being honest and truthful, I think people look with favor on them.
Well, what greater truth was Andy Kaufman revealing?
I think Andy Kaufman and Jim Carrey were both revealing the greater truth of this perspective that in one sense it is kind of all a game, and you can make life whatever you want it to be, and you can be whoever you want to be, and you can change that consciously, that you can step outside of the box, not just of like normal societal prescriptive behavior, but even outside of the box of like what we normally think of as the self and identity. I think that's a lot of what they were good for. They were great for.
I guess when you say that that's a truth, do you mean that is like a truth, or it's an important perspective, or do you think it is like the truth?
I think it's a truth and an important perspective. I don't think that it's any less true than the perspective that most of us take every day. And maybe to me, I think it's equally as important, but I don't think it's the truth.
Yeah, I think maybe another way to put that would be that Andy Kaufman opened the door for people like Jim Carrey, and Jim Carrey opened the door for more people like that, I guess. Basically, they're showing people like, well, hey, I got away with it, so maybe you can too. They're not necessarily, a lot of people who are considered assholes or whatever are breaking the rules, and then other people aren't allowed to break the rules. We see this all the time in government. But if they're just getting up there going, hey, look at me, I'm breaking the rules, and you can too if you want, then I think they are actually, they're sort of corroding the structure of society a little bit. But maybe society has gotten past that tyrannical point where people are feeling their identity being repressed. And they're feeling like they can't do anything about it. And then maybe they see somebody like Andy Kaufman or Jim Carrey and they get inspired and they go, oh, actually I have this piece of myself that I've been dissociating with because I didn't like it. But really, who cares? I'm going to be me. So I think they, at least Jim Carrey sees himself as kind of expanding that flavor of freedom. But probably Andy Kaufman too.
I guess my question is like, if you take that perspective and just be like, none of it's real. It's all a game. The other people aren't real. I'm just creating this happening. I'm creating these happenings with every moment. Then why not discard moral rules? Why not be cruel and manipulative and even violent to other people?
I don't think that's quite the point. I guess you could take it to that level, but you don't have to, because the fact that life is a play of consciousness, or that that we're all actors, that all life is a stage and this sort of thing, it doesn't mean you disregard all the rules. You can, I guess you could if you want to. I mean, technically you can do anything you want, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the character you want to play. You don't necessarily want to accept the consequences of those things.
Ariel, I think that was an interesting question, but I think Andy actually did, right? He did all of the negative things that you talked about. He was aggressive towards people. He got into physical altercations, and Jim did the same thing when he was representing Andy. But one thing that I think differentiates Jim from Andy is that later on, like in his present affect, right? Jim has been pretty well known these days for occupying kind of a sort of a pseudo Buddhist mindset about, you know, just being part of a unified consciousness and disassociating from identity or societal restrictions. But he occupies a lot of practices that are consistent with like loving kindness meditations, where the rules that he's occupying are, you know, occasionally he'll chime in on a social critique when like the president's being a dick, but a lot of his days are just making art and then getting in touch with people now, because he kind of saw that he occupied one end of the spectrum and kind of evolved past that. And I think that's one area where I'm able to, like, I'd be more willing to claim that Jim is playing a more positive societal role, whereas Andy's version, Chris made a point that Andy might have opened the door a little bit wider in American culture for these kind of absurdist jester archetypes. But yeah, just kind of wanted to say that, like, yeah, I think Andy's a good example, Ariel, of your point that, like, yeah, if you disregard all the rules, you turn into an asshole and you hurt people. And I think that's kind of what he did.
Well, Andy Kaufman wasn't disregarding all the rules. Like, he got into some physical altercations, but most of his physical altercations also were staged. Like the whole Jerry Lawler wrestling conflict, like Jerry was totally in on it. And when they were getting in physical fights, even like on Letterman, that was all staged. He wasn't a serial killer. He wasn't a murderer. Maybe he went further certainly than I would into the darkness, into the dark direction, but I don't think that we can just say that Andy Kaufman discarded all the rules and was a psychopath. I agree with Kurt though. Like, if you throw away, like, okay, first of all, if all of life is a stage and we're all actors, and you kind of take this perspective that we can do with life whatever we want, and that the universe is a canvas that we can paint on and create, you would have to be a special kind of person to say, wow, the world is a canvas, let me become a murderer. Like, why would you jump to that? Why would you go there?